What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again talking college football. And today we are talking the Week 12 slate. These are the extra games, your requests, games we didn't get to earlier in the week. If you ever have those, please leave them in the comments. Happy to hit any games you want to hear about. Before we get started, if you like this content, please consider subscribing to the channel or leaving a like. Those two things help a small channel like this a ton, so thank you very much if you have done that. One disclaimer, if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. We do talk sides and totals on this show. And last thing, we are continuing our tests for streams. YouTube has gone so far. We are testing out the multi-stream, adding in Twitter. My internet's been a problem in the past. So if something is wrong in the stream, please let me know in the comments. Never really know what's going to happen with the internet over here. But without further ado, let's dive into the video. We're going to kick things off with, as the show would indicate, a greasy game. North Carolina takes on Wake Forest. This game has a 6-point spread in favor of Wake Forest. The total is 38.5. This has come down. We gave out pretty early in the week, but there is a lines look ahead, if you will. And in that game, we gave this out under 40. I think this number is still take it, but obviously shop around, see what you can get. As far as pacing in the game goes, it's going to be slow. North Carolina is playing at the 123rd ranked pace under Freddie Kitchens. Their pass rate is a little high. That's just because they're getting beat a lot. Wake Forest typically will play slow if they can. They are 72nd in total pace, so that's right around average. But given positive game script, this team will slow with the chance to. They're a run-heavy team. They like to run their quarterback. Now, as far as the stylistics in this game, what we've seen from these teams so far, obviously it's been a tough season for North Carolina. They do have a pair of wins in back-to-back games. It's probably against the two worst teams in this conference. Stanford, who's changed quarterbacks, and Syracuse, who lost their starting quarterback and is basically starting walk-on freshman and Ricky Collins back and forth. Other than that, their only other wins were against Charlotte and Richmond, who have had disastrous seasons against any sort of competition. This North Carolina team has gotten beat, and they've actually had a lot of trouble scoring in those games. 14 points against TCU. They actually only scored 20 points in a win against Charlotte, which is not a great showing in and of itself, but 9 points against UCF, 10 points against Clemson, 16 points against Virginia in a game they should have won. Scoring is not the forte of this North Carolina team. Wake Forest has similar problems. We'll get into player personnel in a second. This team's been a little better. They're coming off back-to-back wins over SMU, which was an extremely greasy game full of turnovers, and they only won by a point. And then they beat Virginia last week with a 20% post-game win expectancy in a game where Virginia lost their quarterback. Other than that, it's been pretty shaky for this team. Their best loss is to Georgia Tech by 1 point, where they actually had a 78% post-game win expectancy. This team just plays a volatile style of football. As far as injuries go, both teams are pretty healthy. Wake Forest is just dealing with Micah Mays at receiver. North Carolina's Chad Lindbergh on the offensive line. He is their best player, so that is worth noting. And then Thaddeus Dixon, defensive back. He's a player who's been injured for this team as well. So when we get into the stylistics, let's start with North Carolina. I actually think they might have an edge at quarterback, which is crazy to say. Gio Lopez has not had a good season, so maybe this says more about Wake Forest than it does North Carolina. Lopez is at a 64% completion percentage, only 6.7 yards per attempt. He's had a lot of trouble throwing the ball down the field. 7 big-time throws, 7 turnover-worthy plays, only 12 sacks. One of the bigger problems has just been the infrastructure. The offensive line is allowing a 39% pressure rate. The receivers have an 8% drop rate. That's just hard to work with. And we just mentioned Lindbergh going down. He's out for the year. This is their best offensive lineman, and he's their center. Without him, they moved Austin Blaskey inside. They took UAB transfer Jordan Hall and played him at tackle. That did not go well. So basically, you kind of have 2 above-average offensive linemen left. One of them is playing out of position in Blaskey, and the other one's Daniel King. Now, both of your tackles and Will Osteen at guard are huge liabilities for this team. This immediately is something that can torpedo your offense. Not to mention, your running attack is 116th, and this isolates what we are looking for at running backs, trying to divorce them from offensive line play, yards after contact per attempt, forced missed tackles per attempt. What are the running backs doing on their own? And the answer is not much. They do have one player in Damon June at 6.3 yards per carry, but this staff has really had no feel for the position all year. They're playing the hot hand, so sometimes you see Ben Hall or Davian Gauss lead the position. Both of those players are below 4.0 yards per carry, so I can't really see why. Even like if June gets struggles on a drive or gets stuffed on a play, like why would you turn to these other inefficient backs? It just doesn't make a lot of sense if Kitchens has not really had a good feel for the offense. Their best receiver is Jordan Shipp. He has 467 yards, which is not great. Their second leading receiver is Kobe Pacer, and no one else is above 120 yards. This offense has been largely inept throughout the year, which should come as no surprise considering their rankings, the points they've scored, and everything. But that's another point in favor of an under. Now you're facing Wake Forest defense, which is 21st. This defense has actually had an awesome showing this year. The only time they've really gotten dominated was against Tommy Castellanos of Florida State. He did hit them for 15.9 yards per attempt, which is pretty bad. But other than that, he's the only quarterback above 6.3 yards per attempt. Virginia is the only team that's really had a lot of rushing success against this team. If I were to poke a hole in their defense, I would say up front they rotate too much. They're basically playing 8 defensive linemen. And I understand keeping players fresh, but at some point, like we need to trim the fat in competitive games. Newer Gotkuth, the Colorado State transfer, is having an excellent season. Jaden Loving's playing well. Mateen Ibrogba, all of them are the strength up front. And you have very good linebackers, 3 of them too, Aiden Hall, Dylan Hazen, Quincy Bryant. That's important because North Carolina can't throw the ball. That is a strength of Wake Forest defense up front. They do have a very good pass rush. And even though they come in 62nd in run defense, this is still a better unit than what North Carolina puts on the field. The secondary has a couple weak links. I don't think it really matters that much. Honestly, I did not think the secondary was going to be that good. They're starting like FCS transfers like Karan Prunty. I believe he's an NCAA transfer. He's having a great season, man. And sometimes these FCS transfers do translate. Most of the time they don't, but once in a while you find a diamond in the rough, and Prunty looks like one of them. Nick Anderson's good. Devon Patterson having an excellent season. So far, advantage Wake Forest defense. Now, when Wake Forest has the ball on offense, it has not been pretty. The expectation was low considering they added transfer Robbie Ashford, who is a runner first, not giving you a lot with his arm. They've tried to use Deshaun Purdy at times. He's been even worse. So you have very little pass game. 57% completion percentage for Ashford. Doesn't throw the ball deep. 6.7 yards per attempt. More turnover-worthy plays than big-time throws. The one redeeming quality, he doesn't take a lot of sacks. So negative plays as far as sack taking, not a huge factor for him. But overall, it's a very limited team. The offensive line is having a lot of trouble run blocking. Specifically, they're 129th. They're actually 40th in pass blocking. And I'll say this. I expected this offensive line to be a complete disaster this year. They've been better than that. Not by a lot, but this is around average, slightly below average. Melvin Siani and Falili Fa'amo have actually been decent at tackle. Inside is where they can really get beat. And they don't have much else. Similar to North Carolina, the skill players have really disappointed this year. Damon Claiborne, he is at 5.5 yards per carry, but he's battled injuries, so I think you could maybe look at the efficiency numbers and the decline we've seen last year to this year. He got hurt immediately this year, and he's been battling through like rib injuries. So I won't put too much of this on Claiborne. The receiving room, I really don't have an answer for. And Mays is going to miss this game. Barnes is their leading receiver, 504 yards, but he's not a full-time player in the offense. Outside of that, they're not getting a lot of help, so they come in 114th in receiving. It's not like they put a ton around Ashford. I don't know if even if they did, if it would matter. So the offense has struggled. And with North Carolina, the games they've won, it's been because of their defense. They've done a great job this year against most of their opponents. No one has bested 4.2 yards per carry. Wake Forest can't throw the ball. The defensive line is elite. Melkart Abu-Jayoud is finally getting some love in the national media. Tyler Thompson, Leroy Jackson are great. You have a good linebacker in Andrew Simpson. Secondary is the weakness, but you're not really worried about Wake Forest beating you over the top. So another point towards the under. This is one we played at 40 again. If you're interested in early lines, we try to give them out as quick as possible on Sunday night. But I'm okay with 38.5. I wouldn't want this to go a lot beyond this. And I think if you can find 39s, obviously shop around, take the best number, especially when it's this low. But I do think this is a number you can play right now. Next up, Georgia Tech takes on Boston College. This game has a 16.5-point spread. The total has soared all the way up to 60.5 points. We took an over at 55.5 on Sunday night, another one we gave out ahead of time. This one, I'm getting a little bit nervous because it's risen so far. I think if you wait, it might come back below 60. But there's a lot of data points pointing towards the over in this game. Before we get ahead of ourselves, so far, Georgia Tech has run hotter than the sun to get to this point with only one loss. Early in the season, they had 2 victories, one against Clemson, one against Wake Forest, where they had win expectancies below 35%. Not to mention that NC State loss, rightful loss, 15% post-game win expectancy. Basically what Georgia Tech is, they've lived dangerously and they finally had it catch up with them. This team should have 2 losses right now based on post-game win expectancy. But that's kind of the ACC this year. No team is separated. And if you win via turnover luck, close games, whatever it may be, you're probably going to have an edge because it's so close. Now, Boston College is not one of those teams. They've been absolutely decimated in conference play. Only win this year is against Fordham. So, I mean, you can't even really look at close competitive games because they don't have a lot of them. And the ones that they did play that were close were either against weak teams as well, or garbage time made them closer than expected. For example, Cal, 50% post-game win expectancy. That was the closest thing they had to an ACC win. Michigan State, they should have won in non-con. They had a 75% post-game win expectancy, but couldn't get it done. Stanford, 26%. So we start getting further and further away there. Injuries in this game, Georgia Tech is coming off a bye, so they are expected to get a ton of players back. Malik Rutherford, Ethan McKinney, Matthew Alexander on defense. Amari Harvey's their best DB. He's back at practice, and so is Jai Gilmore. So much healthier Georgia Tech team. Boston College has a few injuries that aren't really new. Jaden Skeet, Jude Bowery on the offensive line, and Davion Crouch at linebacker. Haynes King is playing a really weird brand of football. They'll obviously be very run-heavy when they can. Their pace is a lot better than you'd think, though. 76th overall. Pass rate 109th. Haynes King's having an excellent season through the air when they ask him to. 8.5 yards per attempt, 10 big-time throws, 0 turnover-worthy plays, which you might see 2 interceptions. How do you get that off of 0 turnover-worthy plays? Tip passes from receivers that are on target. Only 7 sacks for him. He's one of the best quarterbacks at avoiding negative plays in the country. And the offensive line's around average. I honestly thought this unit would be a little bit worse. They've been a liability at times. Ethan McKinney and Malachi Carney are their best players at tackle. Keelan Rutledge is a solid player inside, but other than that, a couple liabilities on this team. But it hasn't really mattered, and that's largely opponent-driven. But this team does have quality skill position players, in addition to King, who leads the team in rushing with 754 yards. Malachi Hosley and Jamal Haynes have formed a tandem. Did not expect Hosley to play this much, but he's been so efficient on the ground. How do you not use him? And Haynes has sort of begun operating as a pass-catching back. And then in the receiver room, it hasn't quite played out the way you'd think with Eric Rivers and Malik Rutherford. But that's because Isaiah Canyon and Jordan Allen have really stepped up and given you 4 receivers that you can legitimately count on. This is a offense that is both top 35 in rushing and receiving efficiency. So they're going to score, and they have. Now, Boston College is 129th in total defense. They're not inside the top 105 in anything. They've allowed over 10 yards per pass attempt in 3 of their last 4 games. Yards per carry in their last 3 games are 10.2, 5.5, and 7.2. They don't have a single elite player. They're fielding a roster full of liabilities. This defense is a huge problem for Boston College, and they've had worse teams than Georgia Tech score on them. When Boston College has the ball, I think it's going to be Dylan Lonergan again. He was incorrectly labeled as the problem with this offense. So, I mean, it's Bill O'Brien. He goes out. Boston College doesn't have any money for football. They're just fielding a roster that's wildly below some of the other teams, even in this conference. So Lonergan, the Alabama transfer, probably their only good transfer, 67% completion percentage, 6.9 yards per attempt, 10 big-time throws, only 5 interceptions, only 14 sacks. Like, does that seem like the problem to you? So he gets benched a couple times now for FIU transfer Grayson James, and believe it or not, the problem was not Dylan Lonergan. Grayson James comes in and plays even worse. So to get to the true answer of why this offense has struggled, like you put nothing around him. And I don't know if this is a lack of NIL resources or what it is, but offensive line, now it's gotten hurt. So this is part of the problem. Like Jude Bowery and Dwayne Alec haven't played in a while. But they've also sort of just lost players year over year to the NFL draft. And with the new coaching staff, they've not done much to replace them. And then you go to the skill position players. You basically have one stud in Lewis Bond. And I guess Reed Harris has played pretty well. But outside of that, like Turbo Richards at 4.3 yards per carry. Jordan McDonald's at 4.3 as well. The run game is non-existent. They don't have a run game that's difference-making for this team at all, which also hurts the offense. Now, in this game, they're playing Georgia Tech's defense, who, despite firing their DC last year, bringing in a new guy, they're still 105th. They're 94th in coverage, 85th in run defense. This is a unit that is continually victimized, like through the air. CJ Bailey, 10.3 yards per attempt. Darian Mensah, 8.5. Kyron Jones, even 8.6. Now, I don't know if Lonergan even is close to living up to some of those guys, but then you see the rushing numbers allowed, like 7.1 yards per carry to NC State, 5.5 to Virginia Tech. Boston College is playing really fast, and they're passing the ball a ton. So even if they don't have a lot of efficiency, it gives you opportunities to put up points. And the player personnel for this Georgia Tech defense don't really make a lot of sense. H.A. Hoffler, the Clemson transfer, is playing way too much on the edge. They have some replacements that look better, but basically your D-line is one good player in Jordan Vandenberg. Your linebackers are limited. E.J. Lightsey and Kyle Efford. Like Efford is this big, blocky, 1985 style linebacker. He's horrible in coverage. And then I guess two of your better defenders are coming back, so this needs to be noted. They're both DBs, Amari Harvey and Jai Gilmore. But like Clayton Powell-Lee has been atrocious at safety. This defense is gettable if you can score on them. And remember, like Georgia Tech has not been some stalwart on defense. They allowed Virginia Tech to score 20 points. Wake Forest scored 29 points on this team. Temple scored 24 points. Some of these teams are awful. So I think you can score on this team and do enough to get towards the over. Now, the number we have is 55.5. We played this on the Sunday night show live on air. 60.5 might be a little rich. I think there's a chance this comes back down. So if you wait on it, you might be able to get a better number. But we're going with an over in this game. It'll be a greasy one, that is for sure. A not so greasy game, but one that was requested a ton and one we didn't get to on the first show is Iowa traveling out west to play USC. This is going to be an awesome game. Now, first things first, the timing, people will talk about that. It's not late at night, so Iowa's not like playing at a 10 o'clock body clock. It's in the afternoon, so that at least is somewhat more favorable for Iowa. Now, they're still playing out west. It's a tough travel trip. Anyway, I think everyone saw Iowa last week in their marquee game against Oregon. Won't get into that too much. They only finished with a 4% post-game win expectancy. The biggest concern I had coming out of the game for Iowa was their trench play. Now, the offensive line still had success, but the defensive line allowed 7.3 yards per carry to Oregon in a game with a pretty predictable script, not just because Oregon held leads, but it was raining, making it tough to throw. Oregon was down 3 of their top 4 receivers. Like, what did you think they were going to do? And they still couldn't stop it. So that's a concern for me. But at the end of the day, they're still playing USC, who might not have the same trenches as in Oregon. The overall body of work for Iowa has been pretty impressive, even though they have a couple things that might be concerning. For USC, their most recent game was against Northwestern. Prior to that, they played Nebraska and beat them pretty cleanly, even though it only finished as a 4-point victory. Their most recent losses came to Notre Dame and Illinois. And the commonality between those games, if you can bully USC in the trenches, you can beat them. So I'll start with this in favor of Iowa's offense. You have Mark Gronowski. He has better efficiency numbers than counting stats, which sort of puts my mind in a pretzel. Like, he only has 12 sacks on the year. He only has 4 interceptions, 4 turnover-worthy plays. He's honestly run bad there. But he also only has 4 big-time throws, 5.9 yards per attempt. He rarely pushes the ball downfield. Now, when he has, he's actually had some success. We saw that work against Oregon when they actually threw a ball straight up the seam to Vonham at tight end. But most of Gronowski's positive play comes via his legs. And that's been up and down this year, largely because of injury, but he buys time with his legs. he's just a tough player to evaluate because clearly limited, but doesn't take a lot of negatives for you, which is how Iowa sustains these long, greasy drives. But he's also not working with a lot, specifically at wide receiver. They have an 8.5% drop rate. It's way too high. They've been forced to use players like Weechin, who's a kick returner. You put him in the game, play him in an elevated role. He fumbles one of the key plays against Oregon that goes against them. Reese Vanderzee is back. That's helped them a bit. But I don't know. When they have to throw, like if Iowa gets down 10 points or something and they need to change their script, things could go south pretty fast for this team. One other weird wrinkle, they do use 12 personnel around 50% of the time. That includes like fullback packages, stuff like that, which I think helps them play the way they want to, which is predictably run the ball down your throat, which, to be honest, that's what I would do too. Their offensive line is amazing. They have elite players at every position. I would not be surprised if all 5 of their starters earn some sort of all-conference honors. Jennings Dunker, obviously, the marquee name at tackle, Bo Stevens at guard, and Logan Jones at center. They're all elite. So, yeah, it makes sense to bully teams, play 12 personnel, use Moulton, use Gronowski in the ground, and throw situationally. This is an advantage over USC. They are 1/12th in run defense. The teams they've lost to have bullied them on the ground. Notre Dame, 7 yards per carry against this USC team. Even Northwestern was at 5.2. Nebraska was at 4.7, and that's just recently. One thing they've tried to do to fix this, they're not playing nickel much anymore. They're using either 3 linebackers or an extra defensive lineman. I don't really think this matters a ton. They don't have a lot of good interior players, like Jai Abasiri's a young 4-star. He's not quite gotten there yet. Devin Tompkins, same thing. They don't really have a strong linebacker opposite Gentry, regardless of who they play. Now, the secondary is fierce. You have a lot of great players back there. But first of all, Iowa doesn't throw. Iowa's going to put you in heavy personnel and then probably take that defensive back off the field. How do you respond? So this is an advantage for Iowa, as long as they can play the way they want to. I'm not sure how it plays out, but I tentatively favor the Hawkeyes when they have the ball. Now, on the other side, it's going to be very hard to stop Jaden Maeva. He's having quietly one of the best seasons in college football among quarterbacks, plays late at night, so a lot of people don't see him. 65.5% completion, 9.6 yards per attempt. 9.6, that's nearly a first down every time he drops back. 19 big-time throws, 11 turnover-worthy plays. He's taken 6 sacks. That's less than a sack a game. Incredible stuff from him, avoiding pressure, because the offensive line now, it has not been that good. They are below average in both pass blocking and run blocking. I would argue some of that is because of injury. They missed a few games from their left tackle and best offensive lineman, Elijah Page. They've had to bench their center. So Gianre Reed's playing there now. And it's kind of outside of Page, right around average. A few guys slightly below, a few slightly above. And that's how you get an overall 86th ranked pass blocking, 94th run blocking. So Maeva's had to navigate that, and he's done so very well so far this year. And that's really the only limiting factor, because King Miller, for being an afterthought the first 6 games of the year, remember, they were using Waymon Jordan and Eli Sanders. They both get hurt in the 6th game. King Miller comes in. He's already at 636 yards, 8 yards per carry. This guy's having a ridiculous season. And then Mekhi Lemon, 937 yards. Jacoby Lane, 520. They're an elite wide receiver duo. And their personnel goes different than this. You want to play 11, you throw Tanook Hines on the field, 4-star freshman. You want to play 12? All right, we're using more Lake McCree. And they've done that in certain games, which makes me a little nervous for Iowa's defense. Certainly the offensive line for USC is worse than Oregon. So I don't think you have quite the same success just running the ball down Iowa's throat. Not many teams have been able to do that, basically just Oregon. They have a strong defensive line with Herquette and Llewellyn on the edge, Graves and Pace inside. Linebacker's not the strongest. They just lost both of their starters from last year and have been rotating a little bit. And the secondary's been solid, but man, I think this is probably the toughest test they will have faced this year. So when you look at what Iowa's played, they did a decent job against the Indiana receivers. That needs to be noted. But when they faced Oregon, they were down 3 of their top 4. Like Rutgers had a little bit of success when they played. So I don't know. It's sort of an incomplete for me. I do think Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane have some success, but I won't lie to you. I'm tentatively going to bet Iowa. Right now, you're seeing juice in favor of USC at the 6.5, or there are some 7s out there, but they're pretty heavily juiced Iowa's way. So we're sitting on a key number. If this got to like 7 even money, minus 110, I'd be really tempted to bet Iowa. I think they have a lot of advantages in this game against USC. Home field obviously is important. But man, good stylistic matchup for the Hawkeyes. This is one I'm probably going to get on the card before the weekend. 7 is the number I'm looking for with reasonable juice. Another game, a pretty good one. A lot of people requested this. Florida takes on Ole Miss. Interesting line movement this morning and last night. This was minus 14 basically through the whole week. Sometimes it was even poked up to 15. Over the night, it drops to 11.5 and might drop further. These are juiced towards Florida. The total is 53.5. Sometimes when this happens, there's an injury that I don't quite know about. As noble as I'd like to think some people on these staffs are, like, injuries leak before we know stuff. So I'm not sure why this is happening. Florida's a good team too. It could just be, all right, we know Florida is a bit underrated. They have a top 10 roster in the country, and a myriad of factors have caused them to finish below that. But anyway, been a really rough season for Florida. Last week, they got blown out by Kentucky. Probably should have been closer. Both teams had 4 turnovers. DJ Lagway got benched. I don't know, man. They play the hardest schedule in the country every year. Their 80 does them no favors, but at the same time, the expectations are higher. And not just from like people that say they should win a national championship, like they're not meeting their win total. So that's a reasonable expectation that they haven't met. So it's been tough with Florida. I don't know what to say, man. You beat Texas, you lose to Kentucky by blowout. You're just going to get these kind of games. Ole Miss, meanwhile, is coming off a game against Citadel. They really have only tripped up once this year. Lost to Georgia in a complete shootout. Georgia scored on every single drive except the final drive of the game where they were salting away the clock. They have played teams close, though. I am a little nervous for them. Fortunately, a lot of these games were early in the season. You beat Kentucky by 7. You beat Arkansas by 6. You beat LSU by 5. None of those teams are particularly good. The Washington State game is very damning, 3-point victory there. And even Oklahoma, 34-26 in a back-and-forth game. They've not been crushing teams, so that sort of leaves the light on for teams like Florida in games like this. Now, Florida's really hurt, especially a receiver like a Dallas Wilson, Eugene Wilson. Tank Hawkins is going to redshirt. One of their better DBs in Deshaun Johnson. Caleb Banks has been out for a long time now. The only player who outright missed their last game for Ole Miss that I'm worried about is Antonio Kite. They had a couple guys go down that should be back, like Daquan Wright. He'll play in this game. I don't know if Lagway is going to start. I think he probably should. Trammell Jones Jr., he did fill in. It wasn't pretty. But, I mean, you come in for a second-half game against Kentucky. For all things Kentucky, all the problems they have a good defense. So, I don't know. Lagway's problem is turnovers, man. 9 big-time throws, 18 turnover-worthy plays, 12 interceptions. He's also taken 17 sacks. You see the flashes of good play, the former 5-star, and then he just throws an inexcusable pass to the other team, and they lose games. The offensive line has not quite lived up to expectation either. Austin Barber and Jake Slaughter have been excellent, but this team was better last year with largely the same players. So coming in 52nd in pass blocking, 26th in run blocking, it's good. It's above average. We just had higher hopes. And you can say the same thing about all the skill players. Now, they lose a couple running backs, so Jaden Balls had to shoulder a larger workload. But you continually have players hurt at receiver. Right now, Vernell Brown and J. Michael Sturdivant are going to have to carry a lot of the weight. And I'm just not sure they have enough to score on Ole Miss's defense, who's a little limited. Their best unit is up front, that defensive line. They haven't even done a good job pass rushing, which is interesting. I thought like the combination of Cam Franklin, Suntarine Perkins, and Princewell Uman-Milan could be one of the better pass rushes in the SEC. But instead, it's been run defense where they've succeeded. And they have a good interior too with Xavier Harris and Will Eccles. But for whatever reason, they're more of a run-stuffing unit than a pass-rushing unit. Regardless, they're a good unit, which makes it hard for opposing teams to run the ball on them. Linebacker's a mess. Secondary is 2 very good players in Antonio Kite and Kapina Gushikin, but there are weak links in the secondary. We've seen that exploited by teams like Georgia and Arkansas. Both of them were above 8.5 yards per attempt. That is not Florida's game right now. Florida's offense has plummeted. I think Ole Miss has defensive advantages against the Gators. Meanwhile, Trinidad Chambliss is having an excellent season after starting the year on the bench. D2 transfer from Ferris State. Incredible season for him. 64% completion percentage, 8.9 yards per attempt. He only has 6 turnover-worthy plays, 2 interceptions, and 7 sacks. He's another guy who's not turning the ball over, not allowing the offense to fall into negative plays. Now, his skill players are much better. You're talking this offense ranks 7th in receiving efficiency, and like they legitimately go 6 deep. Harrison Wallace, Deuce Alexander, Daquan Wright, Caden Lee, DeZon Stribling, and Winston Watkins, the 4-star freshman, is playing a lot now. All of them are at the only one below 300 yards is Winston Watkins. And that's because he's had to come on a little slowly as a freshman, but my goodness, man, I don't know how you defend that. You have personnel variability. You can use different receivers with different skill sets. It's tough to defend, not to mention Kewan Lacey's had an excellent season, 912 yards, 22 catches. He's one of the better running backs in the conference. And a lot of this helps an offensive line that's middling. They're one of these imbalanced units, 26th in pass blocking, 110th in run blocking. Your tackles have actually been the best part of the team, Jaden Williams and Diego Pounds. Interior has struggled, so teams that have good interior pass rush or just a nose tackle that can eat space and blocks could give Ole Miss problems. Florida doesn't really have that right now, and things have gotten worse for this team. Arch Manning, 9.3 yards per attempt. Marcel Reed, 9. Blake Shapen, 9. They allowed 5.3 yards per carry to Kentucky last week. They have a similar defensive line to Ole Miss where they can't rush the passer, but like Tyreek Sapp, a lot of hype on him. He's basically been a run defender. Brendan Bett's been okay inside. They rotate a ton on the defensive line. Miles Graham is your only good backer. The one thing I'll say about Florida's defense, over the last month, they've had basically every starter hurt at one point or another. They now have Devin Moore and Bryce Thornton back healthy. That should help. At the same time, you still have some complete liabilities that are playing too many snaps, like Sharif Denson, Jordan Castile. I don't know, man. Florida's just a limited team. I'm tentatively interested in Ole Miss here with the line movement. I thought this was going to be a surefire pass, but this happened like very early this morning, right before the show. We have this as minus 14.5 on the back end in our model. So there's a key number that you'd pass. At 15, it wasn't playable, but man, now that it's continually plummeting, the only hesitation I have, this has happened to me before where there's a crazy line movement. You don't really have a strong explanation, and then you get hit with an injury. So I'm going to wait and see, but pretty good chance we end up on an Ole Miss side here. We'll see where this ends up going. In the chat, I see some people asking some questions. First of all, thank you guys for being here. This is live right now. It is not a premiere. What I am doing is testing out my internet. We tried this in the summer a few times, and it really struggled. So if you have feedback, if the audio sounds good, even just a thumbs up, let me know. I'll listen to it back, of course, and see how it went. But we're testing out some live stuff largely because it didn't work in the summer, and I got my internet fixed, and I'm hoping we can do more of these in the future. All right. Maryland, Illinois. This is one I am very interested in an over. It was requested once, so that's why we put it on the show. It's not a good game, but if we can find some value, we're going to put it on there. Need to do a little extra work on it. But first and foremost, should be a pretty fast game. Illinois is around average in pace, slightly below that at 88. They will throw the ball a lot. Maryland is playing very fast and very pass heavy, even with the coaching change. And they actually have a quarterback I like quite a bit. So to get to this point, Maryland's had a rough go of it. They win their first 4 games against non-existent competition, the best win coming against Wisconsin. And then since then, it's been very rough. Last time out, they lose to Rutgers. They got blown out by Indiana before that. But offense has still scored some points in most of these games. You put up 30 on Nebraska. We just saw them. Well, they allowed 35 to Rutgers, put up 20. A lot of times, turnovers have done them in games. Illinois, meanwhile, this is a team that can certainly score on you. Their defense has actually been the issue this year. Of their losses, they got slaughtered against Indiana and Ohio State. That is going to happen. The worst loss they took was against Washington, where they allowed 42 points, had 8 penalties, and 2 turnovers. Since then, they also, funny enough, both of these teams, their last opponent was Rutgers. So Illinois played Rutgers in week 10, then had a bye. They blew them out. Last week, Maryland played Rutgers, lost with a 1% post-game win expectancy. But anyway, injuries in this game. Maryland, Sidney Stewart got hurt in their last contest. He's an edge rusher. I don't know if he's going to play. He was limited. Xavier Scott's been out for most of the season at defensive back for Illinois. I believe he got hurt in the Indiana game. The rest of the injured players for this team, Brett Bielema did a press conference and said they would return. So I won't go through the whole list. They're all expected to be back at practice. Maryland, can they score on Illinois? I've been kind of impressed with Malik Washington. He's clearly a freshman, but man, this guy, not always the most accurate, I'll say that. 58% completion percentage, 6.3 yards per attempt, but he only has 3 sacks in the entire season. 9 turnover-worthy plays? I mean, like, this guy is rarely putting his team in harm's way. 3 sacks is incredible. Now, why have they had such a hard time? Well, what if I told you his receivers have dropped 12% of his passes this year? It's one of the highest rates in the country. 131st in receiving efficiency. This is not the Maryland we knew even like a year ago with Ty Felton, Caden Prather. Like, what has happened to this receiver unit? They do have 4 stars like Shalik Knotts and Octavian Smith. Both of them have underachieved throughout their entire careers. So you go out on the portal, you get Jaleel Farouk and Caleb Webb, Oklahoma and Tennessee transfers. Both of them have been horrible. This offense, largely because the skill players are atrocious, has just not done a lot of favors for Malik Washington. In the run game, you lose Monangai. Okay, we go to DeJuan Williams. He's at 3.6 yards per carry. He leads an inefficient committee, but Nolan Ray's at 4.7. Like, can we get a look at the more efficient guy? Like, what are you doing? And this is actually a better offensive line than I thought. Not by a lot, but coming into the preseason, just a glimpse behind the glass, we do our power ratings and predictions. We had this graded as the worst Big Ten offensive line. Now, they've been 5th in pass blocking. However, they've been 132nd in run blocking. So it's been one of the best pass blocking units, one of the worst run blocking units. I've actually been surprised at what like an Alan Herron and a Michael Hershey have done for this team. But the rest of this unit is clearly below average and largely stemming from an inability to run block. At the end of the day, it's still around an average offensive line, especially when they can play their game. Now, Illinois' defense. So you've got this pass-heavy, fast Maryland offense facing Illinois, who comes in 124th in coverage. May surprise some. This was expected to be the strength of their team, but they've allowed now 8.6 yards per attempt to Washington's Damon Williams, 8.5 to Jada Maeva of USC, obviously 11.6 to Fernando Mendoza. Where does Malik Washington stack up on that tier? Clearly below those 3, but you still think he can have some success as long as they can block. Xavier Scott was the best defensive back this team has, and they've had no answers since he went out. You do have a decent defensive line, like Gabe Jacques, James Thompson, Tomiwa Duroje are all fine, and the strength is pass rushing. So they come in 29th, which that's why this 5th ranked pass blocking unit for Maryland against the 29th ranked pass rush for Illinois is such a key matchup to the game in determining whether an over can come in, because you're going to have Maryland score some points in the game. So that's definitely one to watch, and one I'm hesitant just to see what happens. Now, Illinois' Luke Altmaier, he's had a pretty good season, 69% completion percentage, 8.7 yards per attempt, 8 big-time throws, 8 turnover-worthy plays, 8 interceptions. That's unlucky. Generally, it's coming in around 50%. You have 8 big-time throws, you'd expect, 8 turnover-worthy plays, you'd expect something like 4 interceptions, maybe a fumble. So he's run bad. Generally, like, defenders will drop an interception here and there, just on average. Anyway, that's not the only problem. He's taken 23 sacks this year. Now, a lot of times you have to look at the pressure rate. Offensive line's not been great for Illinois, but it certainly hasn't been bad. His individual pressure to sack ratio is 24%. It's just too high. Generally, you want that number below 20%. He's had a very poor feel in the pocket this year, and it's limited the offense. Now, the offensive line is not the best pass blocking unit. They're 14th in run blocking, but 65th in pass protection. The players that have regressed are actually Josh Kreutz and Brandon Henderson, which I wasn't expecting. Your tackles, like J.C. Davis has been elite this year. Melvin Priestley's been okay. They haven't quite reached expectations, but it's not been a liability. And there's a lot around Altmaier. Like, this team is somehow 5th in receiving efficiency. The players that emerge out of nowhere for this team, it's unbelievable. Hank Beatty at 730 yards, Colin Dixon at 422. I thought Hudson Clement was going to be the number 1 wide receiver. Like, I don't know where these guys came from, but they're a legitimately electric wide receiver duo. And then you go 3 deep at running back. So in a game like this, where you've had Altmaier struggle with negative plays at times, what is the chance Maryland can do that? I think the answer is pretty low. First of all, this team played a ridiculously easy schedule to start the year. And since then, they've been annihilated on defense. 9 yards per attempt or worse in their last 3 games, Nebraska, Indiana, and Rutgers. 5 yards per carry in their last 4 games or worse. Their D-line doesn't even have an average player. I think your best guy is probably Zahir Mathis, and they play 8 guys. Like, they're rotating like crazy. They don't have a single good linebacker outside of Wingate. Their secondary is also rotating like crazy, which makes no sense. Efficiency-wise, you have a couple good players like Jalen Husky, Lakai Rowland, Dante Joyner. But I don't really have any confidence they keep those guys on the field. I'm not sure why they're rotating them off to begin with. other than opposing offenses are just running a lot of plays, and it's hard to be in conditioned shape to play that much. But I don't know, man. Like, Maryland's not doing themselves any favors. I think Illinois scores in this game largely at will. So how many points can Maryland put up? According to their team total, you probably need them to score, I don't know, if they scored like 14 points, you'd probably be pretty happy with this team. Their team total is around 19, but I think Illinois can do more than their fair share. So I'm interested in an over in this game. We'll see where it comes in. Another reason to potentially wait, it's been dropping. This was at 52.5 yesterday. It's at 51.5. So you might end up with even like a 50 if you wait. Who knows? Last game we'll talk about today is TCU taking on BYU. This is a 3.5-point spread in favor of BYU, a 51 total. We showed value on TCU right away when it was at 5 and 4.5. I hesitated just out of scar tissue, having bet TCU this year. And the reason, this TCU team has wildly underachieved. They just lost to Iowa State, who's down every starter in their secondary. They did have a 53% post-game win expectancy, but my goodness, man, what are you doing? I did bet them against West Virginia. They did not cover the spread. They win by 6. They did beat Baylor somehow in a crazy shootout that was back and forth. This team is a loss to Kansas State, 41-28. They lost to Arizona State earlier in the year, blowing a 17-0 lead. It's just very up and down for TCU. You're not sure what you're going to get. I think there are a couple of reasons why. And we'll get to that, but it makes it very difficult to back TCU. BYU, meanwhile, has been a team I've been betting against since the preseason. I'm holding their under win total, which is hanging by a thread at 8.5. Bet it before the Red Slap stuff. Anyway, after running hotter than the sun to be undefeated heading into Texas Tech, they get blown out decidedly, and it could have been even worse if Texas Tech could learn how to punch in a red zone score rather than kick a field goal. But prior to that, they beat Iowa State with a 38% post-game win expectancy. They beat Colorado with a 30% post-game win expectancy. This team should have 3 losses. As far as injuries go, both teams are fairly healthy. I would watch Colton Deary for TCU. He did get hurt but returned. Close game. I think he just wanted to gut it out. Ed Small hasn't played in a while for them. A couple of depth guys for BYU, but not much. One of the biggest problems with TCU has been Josh Hoover. For all of the good, you get a lot of bad, man. 65% completion percentage, 17 big-time throws. That's good. The problem is 19 turnover-worthy plays. 19. Only 8 of them have been converted to interceptions. He's taken 12 sacks. Wide receivers haven't helped that much. They have a 7% drop rate. So it's been kind of tough on offense for TCU. And I've been surprised by their O-line. You actually didn't really see a drop-off when Deary went down in the last game. Remington Strickland played in pretty well. The concerns are the tackles. Quentin Harris has had an awful season. And Ben Taylor Whitfield, he's been better than last year where he was atrocious, but he's still up and down. And this team has more problems run blocking. So that moves over to the run game. They're 83rd there. Kavorian Barnes has been hurt. They need him to be healthy down the stretch. He's actually been less efficient than Trent Battle and Jeremy Payne, but they continually play Barnes when he's healthy. The receivers are awesome. Eric McAllister, Jordan Dwyer, it's hard to stop them. But there's not much else behind those players. Manjack's been hurt. Ed Small's been hurt. They played like Dozie Ezukanma at times. It's just not the best unit. But BYU's defense, they're 43rd. They come in 70th overall, or 70th in run defense, 69th in pass rush, 32nd in coverage. They've gotten beat a couple times, like Rocco Beck got them for 8.6 yards per pass attempt. A couple teams have run on them, especially like Iowa State above 5 yards per carry. Same with Utah and Arizona. They just don't have a good strength of schedule, especially offenses faced. They played Utah and Texas Tech, and the rest is kind of unreasonable. And both of those teams struggled in the red zone, which should regress positively for them, negatively for BYU. On the defensive line, John Taumapeu has been their best player. The rest of the group is hanging like right around that above average to slightly above average unit. And otherwise, your best players are a pair of safeties, Satuala and Wall. TCU should be able to score on this team. As long as you don't have Hoover putting the ball in harm's way, I would be surprised if this offense struggles. I don't know. It's really hard to diagnose what's happened with Josh Hoover this year. I don't have the answer, but it's definitely scary. Meanwhile, Bear Bachmeier, we kind of saw the struggles of the offense finally against a good defense. He has a 62% completion percentage, 11 big-time throws, 12 turnover-worthy plays. The receivers have a 10% drop rate for him, so it's not like he's been done a ton of favors. I still think it's I would bet on the receivers long-term. Chase Roberts has been solid. Parker Kingston. The kick returning, sprinter. I know he holds some Utah records. They flash continually. And even JoJo Phillips returned in their last game. The problem is they drop too many passes. So it hurts their efficiency overall, drops them to 73rd, and leads to, it kills drives. LJ Martin's been a good running back for them. He's been banged up, but he should be healthy here. Bachmeier's your second leading rusher, 4 yards per carry. And your offensive line's pretty good. They're still rotating both guards. I don't know why they're doing this. But your center's an excellent player in Bruce Mitchell. Tackles have been okay. They're just relatively untested. And they got beat pretty bad at times against David Bailey and Romello Height in the Texas Tech defensive lineman. Now, TCU's not quite on that level. They're another defensive line that's third in run defense, 102nd in pass rush. Certainly just don't prioritize getting after the passer. They'll stand on that secondary, which hasn't always worked. Now, they're kind of like average across the board. They're consistently allowing quarterbacks at 7 yards per attempt or more, but rarely like 8. Same thing on the ground. Now, run defense is better than pass rush. Devin Deal, Paul Olawale have been good run defenders on the edge, but really the best players are probably your linebackers, Nnamdi Obiezor and Caleb Elarms-Orr. Secondary is Austin Jordan and Bud Clark, who are solid, but a couple weak links occupy that unit. I just don't really buy BYU's passing attack at this point. Now, there are enough questions with TCU's defense for me, and TCU is a team where I'm not sure I can take this now that it's moved to 3.5 and I miss the better numbers. But it's definitely one worth watching. Maybe some TCU moneyline sprinkles, but that's one we're going to watch throughout the day and see where it goes. Checking on the chat before we get out of here. Couple questions. Let's see what we've got so far. Nice. Stream was poor early, but recovered. Okay, that's good to know. Sometimes the stream, the test today was sending it to multiple locations, Twitter and YouTube. The early tests with just YouTube worked fine. So trying to see how this goes with both of them. NFL, the most scripted league in the world. Yeah, I don't know about that. What happened to Tua's brother? He graduated. Didn't quite make it to the NFL. Do you think Illinois covers this big spread? Let's see what the model has of this. I'm actually curious. Tentatively, I lean yes, but the math is smarter than me. Okay, so we actually show some value on Maryland, which is a bit surprising to me. We've kind of had Maryland as an underrated team this year. They've definitely run poorly in some spots and had some very weird plays, like a couple that stand out to me. I can't remember the game, but one of the fumbles they lost in the red zone was the quarterback trying to keep his balance, and he uses the ball to stabilize himself on the ground and drops it. The defense recovered it. So they've had a lot of weird plays go against them. They just can't stop anyone. So I guess Maryland would be the side if you forced me to pick one. We tentatively show some value there, but nothing crazy in that game. We'll take the over in this game. I tend to agree there. But that's it for the chat that I see. Thank you guys for watching and giving me some feedback. I'll watch it back and decide where we put the stream moving forward. YouTube will remain. Twitter, we'll see. Hopefully the audio was good enough. But otherwise, thank you for watching. Until next time, good luck. We will see you later.